Hello, this is Father Enoch for Orthodoxy versus Everyone. For on the new calendar date, the 20th of December. Father Joseph is on his way, but since he'll be a little late, I'll start. Okay, Baitlord says in the chat, question he asks is, are there a lot of verses in the Bible where the essence-energy distinction is apparent? I actually think we've actually answered this question before in like the first 3 podcasts, but you can find verses like Exodus 33:20 where God says, "No man can see my face and live," but Moses was still allowed to see God's back as he passed. So I think that's kind of a reference, but I'll let Father Joseph decide if he wants to talk any more about that. But we've actually answered that extensively before. Baitlord says, individualism versus collectivism, what are the flaws of each and which is the best? I think we've actually talked about that before as well. Obviously, the group, I suppose, but justice always comes first. So if the group wants to do something unjust or evil to one or two or three people, then whatever is just has to be done, not whatever is in the majority. So I don't think it's the correct way of. I don't necessarily think it's the correct way of thinking. You probably have to be a little bit more specific. Someone says, were Orthodox monarchies overall a lot more ethical than Catholic monarchies? I don't particularly know. I'd say that due to the fact that they're Orthodox, you're going to have salvation. But if you mean in the sense, was the King of Hungary, was his role more morally just than the Tsar of Moscow? Maybe in some areas, but maybe not in other areas. I think it's the principle of monarchical rule that we're defending. Nigel Farage says, what do you think of Jordan Peterson, pros and cons? I think we've actually answered this before again. I've watched a few things. A lot of it seems just like kind of standard self-help stuff that you could have read in books from the 1980s. So I don't really see I'm not particularly interested in him, and the only interest I have is when people ask me about him. So from the few things I have listened to him, he seems to be obsessed a lot with who was that one disciple of Freud? He was into Gnosticism a whole lot, and the archetypes of the mind. I can't remember. He kind of sounds a lot like that guy. So I don't really think Orthodox should have a big interest in him. I know he's a big classical liberal and all this, and I don't really like any of that stuff. How do I access the roles established for each ecumenical council? Is there a site for this? How do you know a website where I can access everything the Church Fathers wrote? Well, if you want to read the canons, which is what you're talking about, established by the ecumenical councils, you can find them I'm going to post the link, and it's at the bottom of the chat, obviously. If you go to that page, it has a lot of different books there, but if you go to there are several books which are defined as canons, like canons of the ecumenical councils, canons apostolic canons, canons of the local councils, canons of the individual fathers. Those would be the rules or the canons. Now, as for a site that contains everything the Church Fathers wrote, well, there is no such site at this moment, in English at least. The closest you're going to come to would be a site that has the entirety of the Erdmann series, which was one of the first major English translations of 38 volumes of the early Christian writings. And I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. And there is a second site that's attached to that site, which has additional texts of the Church Fathers or writings related to them. I think somebody who would, if someone theoretically were to read everything there, they'd probably have a very good knowledge of the early church. Another question is, what do you think about the Christian identity movement who say that the lost tribes of Israel were actually European and not Jewish? I don't believe any of that. Some of that Christian identity stuff kind of comes is kind of a distortion from like old British Israelism. I'm trying to remember. British Israelism was the view that the ancient Israelites actually, or the lost 10 tribes actually settled in the Britain, but there's really no evidence for any of that. And you'd have to also say, if that was true, then when does the New Testament take place? I mean, and the problem is that what's so-called Christian identity is actually a lot more than simply saying, oh, well, you know, some Europeans are like the descendants of the Jews, as wrong as that is. It actually has a lot of crazy stuff like, you know, the old National Alliance people and all the other stuff back in the 80s and 90s. Maybe not National Alliance, but there were other groups related to that. And they were teaching stuff like only white people have souls and only they can be saved. And everybody else is like a pre-Adamite mud person, which is totally contrary to everything you read in the Bible, everything you read in the early church fathers. It was almost like they were trying to take Talmudism and make Talmudism for white people. So they made their own. I mean, it was just as bad as rabbinic Judaism, in my opinion. So we don't accept that. Okay. Let's see. There's the Santa Claus question. Danny Pipe says, what's with all the division in true Orthodoxy? I'm a World Orthodox guy who's sympathetic to your position, but the division just screams schism. I'm not sure. Are you asking about the fights among different true Orthodox jurisdictions, or are you asking about the dispute between true Orthodoxy and World Orthodoxy? If you're asking about the latter case, I would say that most of the people who call themselves true Orthodox in the world are more or less distinguished into two different communions. That would be the communion of churches I am a part of, and then there's another one which is centered around a synod in Greece called the Chiusa Synod or the Kallinikos Synod. So I'd probably say like maybe 80% are in the, or 70%, 80% are centered there. Maybe up to 80%, if not more. The other 20% generally has to do with, I don't know, the fallout of the night. It's a very complicated question. There was all kinds of fights that happened in the late 1980s when there were attempts by some of the bishops in Greece to take over the main synod. Father Joseph might know more about that, might want to talk more about that. But I think there actually are real people who are engaged in schism. But then the other problem is that a lot of people who call themselves true Orthodox actually are like part of Hakna, although most of Hakna kind of disintegrated. And, you know, they teach Imaslavi, they teach kind of what's called name worship, which is a condemned heresy, so I wouldn't consider them true Orthodox. So we'll go over some of these questions again when Father Joseph shows up. Nigel says, how would you respond to the people who say that the Eucharistic wine Jesus is referred to in the Bible is actually non-alcoholic grape juice? I've heard that, but I've seen no evidence for that. Father Joseph is kind of knows a little bit more about that subject, so we'll let him go through that question again. Because you have to remember that in the ancient way of making wine, from the videos I've watched, would be they just stomp the grapes out. They, you know, have a gigantic, like a barrel full of grape juice, pure grape juice, or kind of like a concrete or stone containers, and they would seal it up, but they'd have kind of like a vent, I believe. And the grape juice would naturally ferment, actually, because as long as you, I mean, there's actually, I think, yeast on the skin. So if it's made in that natural sense, if you have natural grape juice, it will eventually ferment under normal conditions. Okay, someone says, do you think that countless times Jews were banned from different countries throughout history were justified on most occasions? I'd probably say most of the time, yeah. That's just my opinion. Let's say half the time. Let's just say half the time, because a lot of times it was always connected with issues like charging interest or usury. That's almost invariably what it was always centered around. So, I mean, there probably were many unjust things done. I understand that. But there were a lot of times it wasn't just, you know, the poor innocent, you know, rabbi and his family. They were actually charging exorbitant amounts of interest, or they were actually cooperating with the with a corrupt aristocracy. Because, for example, I think they're like one of the problems that happened in the 1600s and among the Ukrainian population was that the Polish nobility couldn't charge interest theoretically, so they had Jews work for them, charge interest, exact exorbitant amounts of rent, and the situation got out of control, and people did not like it. So, but almost all the time there was some, because often people would invite the Jews in, and then something would happen after about 15, 20, 30 years, and then they'd be asked to leave. So it wasn't just the evil Christians over and over again doing these things. Danny Pipe says, where does the teaching on the toll houses actually stand? Is it a doctrine, a theologumena? It seems there is so much disagreement. With that considered, doesn't this disagreement highlight an epistemological problem within Orthodoxy? Anyone want to join? Okay. The teaching on the toll houses, as far as I understand, it is the actual teaching of the church. The problem comes when people define exactly what they mean. The basic explanation of the telonia is that after we die, demons and angels dispute over our soul. Demons want to take the soul and drag it to hell. Angels wish to take it to paradise. That's the basics of it. And you can read throughout the lives of the saint. We're not just talking about obscure Greek saints or obscure Egyptian saints. You can read, for example, in the life of Saint Columba of Iona, which was written in the 7th century. There are numerous examples in that life of how, by Saint Columba's intervention, the souls of people who had departed were saved from demonic attacks. So I'd say it's a teaching. I think what happened was that in the 1970s, late 70s and early 80s, there was a disagreement over this. There was a deacon in the Rokol called Lev Puhalo. I think he later became Lazar Puhalo. And he said that the toll house teaching is heretical. So he accused anybody teaching of teaching heresy. And Father Seraphim Rose responded and wrote the book The Soul After Death. Now, the Russian Synod tried to impose kind of a moratorium, I believe, on debates about this, which was violated by Puhalo, and he kind of left and had a career after that. But I'd say it's the teaching of the church. However, I would not say, from what I understand, that you have to believe in explicitly 20 toll houses, because there are some texts and manuscripts which actually say there's like 23. I think one says there's 15. But it's the essential teaching that after departure, there is a dispute between angels and demons over the soul. And I'm going to give a link in the chat to an article that was translated some time ago, and I posted on the NFTU about 3 years ago. And the article is from Metropolitan Macarius of Moscow's book, Orthodox Dogmatic Theology, which was composed, I don't know, like in the 1860s or 1870s. And if you read this article, I would suggest everyone interested in this question reading this article, because Metropolitan Macarius goes over it. And what Metropolitan Macarius basically says, hold on, I'm trying to get to the bottom of the article so I can read you the section. He says that one must, however, note that as in general, with all depictions of matters of the spiritual world, for us, clothed with flesh, there are inevitable features which are presented more or less physically, anthropomorphically, or so in particular, inevitably they occur in the detailed teachings of the toll houses, which this human soul passes upon separation from death. And therefore we must firmly keep in mind the instruction that the angel gave to the Venerable Macarius of Alexandria when he just began talking about the Telonia. St. Macarius, the angel told St. Macarius of Alexandria, quote, "Accept earthly things here as being the weakest representation of the heavenly. It is necessary to consider toll houses not in the rough or sensual sense, but as much as is possible for us in a spiritual sense, and not be tied to particulars which have been presented by various authors and in various stories of the church differently, while preserving the unity of the basic idea regarding the toll houses." So the unity, hold on one second, I have to give Father Joseph the Hangout link. Okay. Okay. The unity of the teaching is that after death, the soul is disputed over by angels and demons, but that ultimately what happens is determined by God. Although our prayers for the departed do affect that in some way we're not quite capable of understanding. Okay, so with that considered, doesn't this disagreement highlight an epistemological problem within Orthodoxy? An epistemology is the theory of knowledge. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Do you mean a doctrinal agreement highlight an epistemological problem within Orthodoxy? Father Joseph, I can hear my voice over there. Theory of knowledge. I'm not
hold
quite
on.
Sure what you mean by that? You mean okay. Hello, Father Joseph.
Hi, how's it going? Benedicite.
Benedicite. Okay, so a question maybe you want to talk about is: does the disagreement between some about the toll houses indicate an epistemological problem within Orthodoxy?
No, it didn't until the 1970s when Lev Pahala decided to promote it.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, so here's another question, Father. I left some questions up above since they're kind of interesting and there's a lot to talk about. But someone asked, let's see, about wine, about whether the wine used in the Bible was grape juice.
No.
Okay, so the question is, where does that come? Where does that come from? How do we prove that the wine used?
It comes from the temperance movement in the 18th century. A bunch of attempts to say that that was the historical wine used because of an Anchorite position that took hold among certain Protestant groups and among the Mormons.
Mm-hmm. It's actually quite difficult to make as an argument. Okay. All right. Let me see. Some of the questions at the top we've actually already went over in previous programs. So
I'll be here a couple of minutes.
Trying to. Why are there someone asks, why are there so many absolutely horrid Orthodox YouTube channels? The Orthodox Lunatic, Truth Be Told, and Yusuf Reyes. I don't really know some of these. I have no idea. I don't know. Assaulter Rifle 33 says, why isn't the Council of Elvira valid, and was the canon from that council against icons inserted by the Prots at a later date? Well, first off, there are actually only something like the first 10 canons or 15 canons of Elvira are actually original to the Council of Elvira. The so-called canon against the icons, which is like, I don't know, like canon 33 or 43 or something like that, is not part of the original council. Secondly, it's not a canon against icons; it's been mistranslated. So, the Council of Elvira is valid. It was not a heretical council, but it did not teach iconoclasm. That's just made up, and people have a wrong translation of the canon of a later added canon, by the way.
Plus, it's important to keep in mind that local canons have local force, but that doesn't make them. That doesn't give them ecumenical force.
Yes.
So they're not. It's not that they're not valid. It's just that they're not applicable to other churches and synods.
Okay. Lazar Pahalo still around spewing heresy all over YouTube. Yep, that's true. So are a lot of other people. Okay, well, I think, what is the best Orthodox Bible translation with the full Septuagint? There's a translation called the Lancelot Britton translation, which was made in the 19th century, and I kind of use that every now and again. There might be some other ones. I don't know. Do you know if there are any other translations of the Septuagint, Father Joseph?
Well, the Lancelot Brennan being the standard, of course, the Orthodox Study Bible is a newer translation that uses that makes use of the Septuagint. There's the Revised Standard, which references the Septuagint, the expanded one, and I think, I'm not sure if there was, the people who did the Orthodox New Testament did an Old Testament. I'm not sure about that. Brenton's always been the way to go. I personally, have a preference towards the Douay Rheims, which is based on the Latin Vulgate. So, I think it's less. It's more of an academic issue unless you actually read it.
All right. I am now going to be posting in the Apologetics War Room the link to the Hangout, and we'll see what happens. How is everything going, Father Joseph?
Oh, it's going. I'm just reading through the comments. I don't know what Danny means by me making an sound.
I think he says when we say a lot, like we're thinking about I'm not sure, I'm not sure, you know. That's just a standard reaction of a lot of people to trying to grasp words.
Danny, I like a lot of your questions. Sometimes it seems like I can't tell whether you're a Roman Catholic or an Orthodox. But you know, one thing I mean, you mentioned yesterday the possibility of starting your own YouTube channel. I'd say go for it. The more the merrier. I'm probably going to, I'll probably I'm looking at just doing doing a channel of my own. Which that's everyone. I think if you have something to say that's important, I think you should put it up. We're not professional. I do say a lot. I can avoid it if I choose to speak slowly. If I choose to enunciate, I try to speak on the fly here because of the fact that it's a live program. If I wanted to, I could avoid it altogether.
Yes, you see, that's a lot of times when you're listening to people who have YouTube programs. Sometimes they like cut when they record the program, like there's like jump cuts.
Yeah,
it's a live program. You can't avoid it. Yeah. Well, I don't really see any other questions that actually we haven't gone through or actually are worth answering. For example, people keep on asking us about like the essence. People keep on saying, what are the best Bible verses of the essence energy distinction? Now, we've been asked it like 20 different times, and we had a whole program.
That's part of the reason why I was going to kind of do a different apologetics channel, just based on pre-recorded things, so we can just reference back on these things, and as opposed to repeating the same questions over and over. I think that one of the things that we're not doing is we're not focusing on the actual work of apologetics, and so that's something we need to do. It can't. Apologetics isn't simply a question and answer show. It's got to be something where you're actually dealing with heterodox, you're responding to them, and at times you're challenging them because you want to bring them to the church.
Now, this is Orthodoxy versus everyone, so we're answering questions that go beyond the standard debate. Now, there have been a few people going around different groups saying that the Orthodox position, and I want to answer this a little bit. They've been saying the Orthodox position is that you have to believe in the flat Earth.
That's flat earthers that are.
Now they've been getting into the church, and other people have been saying that you have to believe in geocentrism, and if you don't believe in geocentrism, you're teaching a heresy.
Another Janus crowd.
Yes. Well, the problem with that is that in the when Copernican, well, first off, the Copernican view is actually not even accurate. Also, I mean, Copernicus believed the sun was the center of the universe or something like that. But first off, whether you believe the Earth is at the center, the sun revolves around the Earth, or the Earth revolves around the sun, or whatever you want to phrase it, that's not a dogmatic issue as far as I can tell. You can't be excommunicated for believing that. Secondly, during the 17th century, there were many well-known well-known Russian Orthodox theologians like Epiphanius Slavensky, who is a well-known hieromonk at the Kiev-Pechersky cave monastery. He was an exegete. He was a theologian. He wrote some philosophical tracts. He translated a lot of works. And he translated some of Copernicus's material and put it in kind of a compendium. And the book was officially published by the Russian Church. And no one accused Epiphanius Slavensky of heresy. Maybe not everybody believed it, but he just said, a lot of people teach this, and I think he said he believed it. No one accused Epiphanius Slavensky of heresy. What happens is sometimes people try to point to a 1756 decision of the Holy Synod that wanted a book published by Mikhail Vasilievich Lomonosov, I believe. He was kind of a Russian scientist. They wanted it censored. And the book he was publishing was a book by a French writer, an Enlightenment writer called Fontenelle. And in Fontenelle's book, he teaches that there are there's like an infinite amount of worlds in an infinite universe, and there's infinite amount of people living on infinite amount of planets, or something like that. And the Holy Synod said, well, this book is contrary to orthodoxy. All right. And so they kind of published it. They only allowed it on impartially censored versions. All right, because there was like the Russian censor, which a lot of countries had versions of these censors. The book was not censored because it was teaching that the earth revolves around the sun. That was not why the book was censored. It was censored because of the plurality of worlds, of infinite worlds teachings, which is kind of the teaching invented by what's his name? Who was the crazy guy that got burned at the stake in the 1590s because he was into the occult?
Bruno.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not true that the Holy Synod censored the book because it was teaching the earth moved. That's not why. It censored the book because it was teaching, basically the universe was infinite in size and it had infinite amount of people. Almost, it was teaching the Mormon view, essentially, which a lot of these Enlightenment people, believed about the size of the universe. Secondly, if you actually look in St. John of Kronstadt's book, like his My Life in Christ, he references all the time the earth moving around the sun, and he makes comparisons that like God is like the sun, we must all revolve around him and bask in his light and things like that. No one ever accused St. John of Kronstadt as heresy. For example, St. John of Kronstadt on page 336, because I looked this up, of My Life in Christ says, God created the earth capable of easily revolving around such an immense planet as the sun, as well as on its own axis, capable of generating innumerable sorts of plants, water, etc., etc. Okay, so that's pretty simple there. Also, St. Theophan the Recluse, in section 3 of his own prayer, mentions the earth revolving around the sun just kind of as a normal afterthought. What is true is you did have some Russian Orthodox right. For example, Theophany says, I'm looking at the text now, he says, the sun stands in the middle, and all our planets go around it, all to it, and all are constantly turned to it by any side. So he's calling this the earth a planet. And calling the earth a planet is not a heresy, by the way. Now, there were some Russian Orthodox writers in the 19th century who published anti-Copernican books and such. Yeah, but no one ever got excommunicated from the chalice or deposed from the priesthood because they said the earth revolves around the sun. So I know people are out there trying to kind of generate some kind of discussion about this. Yeah, okay, so Danny Pipe says I personally believe in geocentrism. Okay, fine, but I'm saying it's not a dogmatic issue. All right. Okay. Okay, so is there some spiritual books to read before the Philokalia? What do you say about that, Father Joseph?
I don't think it's an apologetics question. So my personal view would be that that's something you should discuss with your priest. Personal recommendations on my part include The Way of a Pilgrim and The Way of the Ascetics by Tito Colliander. It's a great book that is extremely helpful. This is interesting. I was on one of these Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant debate forums on Facebook. And it's like 5,000 people. And one of them said that apparently some guy answers Roman Catholics and he answers Orthodox and everyone live. And he's actually doing it right now. So a part of me is, to participate, link provided shortly before the show here. Bring your questions and challenges. Okay, this is, it's kind of like basically what we do here, except he's probably wrong on everything, and that's okay. But I was kind of hoping it was a call-in, because that would have been fun to do live.
Okay, are there really any other point? Oh, one interesting point is, since it's Orthodoxy versus everyone, and we can kind of talk about anything related to Orthodoxy, that the new ecumenical patriarchate created church in the Ukraine, their head, this Metropolitan Epiphany, has mentioned transitioning them eventually to the new calendar. So that's kind of an interesting point of discussion. That's kind of where the Fanar wants to go with everybody, it seems. And I think there was some other question on the previous program that we declined to answer about, were all attacks since 9/11. Since it's Orthodoxy versus everyone, we're all attacks since 9/11 supposed to be false flag? And the answer is, I have no idea. Governments do false flag attacks all the time. That actually is known from history and such, but not everybody who's crazy and shoots up something is necessarily a not paid actor. It could just be a crazy person. So what do you think about that, Father?
To be honest, I've commented on it. I commented on it yesterday. I don't feel comfortable declaring certain things false flags. There are some things that are false flags. We are aware of it. I just don't. My job here is to defend orthodoxy. I'm not interested in whether as sad as it is, and I'm a New Yorker. I remember 9/11, very, very vividly. Thousands of people died, and I don't feel the urge to go into whether it was Muslim terrorists or George Bush. It doesn't matter to me. Somebody killed a lot of people, and that itself is horrifying. And I'm more concerned, in my opinion, with dealing with the problem of evil that would create that to begin with.
Okay, do we have any more questions, Father?
Well, I don't see any here. Now, this is okay. It looks like Danny is asking about Western Rite. I clicked this Protestant guy's thing, and it opened up another Hangout link. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens. I don't know if you can have two Hangouts at once, and I don't know if what I say on one Hangout would pop on the other.
I don't know.
Again, I could find out.
Okay, so Danny says, how would you respond to critics of the Western Rite as a former set of a contest? I'm super attracted to the Western Rite, but I have heard some really bad things. To explain further, do you think if the West is to convert to Orthodoxy, they will turn to the Western Rite? Well, first you'd have to say, what are the specific criticisms people are making of the Orthodox Western Rite? If they're saying, oh, well, they're using post-schism things like St. Tikhon, Anglican stuff, well, we don't do that. That's a valid criticism of not doing the Western Rite correctly. So a lot of times it's very vague mentions. They don't really explain what they're talking about. Because how is somebody honestly going to pick up the sacramentaries composed by St. Gregory the Great and say, this is evil and heretical?
I think that the bigger problem is that people like lumping everything together. While we can talk about the minutiae and ultimately...
Okay, Danny Pipe says disorganized post-schism stuff. Well, we don't do post-schism stuff, so that doesn't apply to us.
And a lot of people try to remove the post-schism stuff over time. It's, the point is, I find most of the criticisms of the Western Rite seem to start with minutiae, but then focus on the entire ethos. And you find that they have a problem with everything. It's not just the parts that are post-schism. A lot of the times people have a problem with the Gregorian chant. A lot of the times people want to believe that Roman Catholicism is what the Western Rite was. And so they feel that they have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And if they don't, then they have to fully accept how Roman Catholics do things, which is the wrong way to do them. So I think it's a much more complex question, and you really have to get to the psychology of the person asking.
Yeah, and a lot of the criticisms that oftentimes about you have to have one rite and stuff, I mean, that's ultimately kind of an old believer criticism. And if you kind of embrace that criticism, you actually will, turn into, kind of an old believer in your mentality, which means you're going to become a heretic and a schismatic. Okay. We may be out of questions. Only 33 minutes in. Let me see if there's any.
Know what I want? Can I try my experiment and see what happens?
Sure.
All right, let's see what happens if I'm going to click their Hangout and see what happens if it goes on to our Hangout. You're already in a video call. Okay, I can't do that.
So you're going to have to drop out to interact with them, Father Joseph.
I don't know if I want to do that because I don't know what they're doing. I can always hang up and come back.
Okay, well, I got to find something to talk about in the intervening period of time.
Oh, so. Well, in that case, I'm not going to leave you hanging there, Father. So if we're taking a look here, my biggest issue, to be quite honest, and why I sound like a little cranky, is because I really want to get back to answering heterodox. I think that that's something that has been lost over time. It's kind of what started, me focusing on the things on Facebook and stuff like that, is because people deserve an answer. We have a tendency, and it's something that is ingrained. I won't say it's cultural, but I will say it's social, towards insularity. And the problem is that's not the way we're supposed to be doing things, if, assuming there's no active persecution going on. Although martyrs did risk their lives to spread the gospel at that risk.
Well, heterodox people are more than welcome to come here and ask us questions. So
Yeah, I know, and I think that's the big challenge, is challenging them, which is part of the reason why this interests me so much, to see what happens. But in any case, that's just my thoughts.
all right. I don't think we have much more information to discuss, Father. We might want to wrap up early unless we have anybody call, or there's any specific subject you see that you want to bring up. I mean, this is Orthodoxy versus everyone, so any subject related to Orthodoxy, even if it's not even if it's not.
Yeah, this is the Ask Any. This is the Ask.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody always asks us all these questions that have nothing to do with apologetics. And then, when we actually have the Orthodoxy versus everyone program, no one asks us.
Danny asked about the triads. Did you answer that one?
No, I did not. You answer it.
Okay. I would say that they are. They should be. They should be done with care.
Explain the triads first. What does it mean?
The triads are writings by Saint Gregory Palamas.
Yes.
In defense of the essence and energies distinction. I think that they're helpful. I think that, again, it's not the, I don't know. I'm amazed that people are really confused by essence and energies. It's still kind of weird to me that, the majority of people that I've seen with objections to orthodoxy that's their biggest problem. And it makes me wonder what they think God is. Because I'm confused as to how you can really believe that God is so other, to the point that even when he interacts with us, which is the essence of Christianity, he's not really doing it. And it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it makes sense that someone like Barlam the Calabrian would think it, but it doesn't make sense. I mean, God must be totally distant to people if they really think that. And that's just bizarre, especially for people who claim to have things like having Jesus in your heart when you don't really mean it. It's just bizarre. It's all strange. Mm-hmm. And, it's, let me see here. See, the argument isn't as superficial as you might initially think. Danny, how would you respond to those who make an argument for the papacy by way of practicality? I'd argue with tradition. If it was such a practicality, our Lord would have invented it.
And also, they say it's really useful, supposedly, to have a visible head who can determine truth and deliberate on a minute. Well, how is that working out for you now with Pope Francis?
Yeah, exactly. How does that work out with every Hildebrand? It doesn't.
How does it work out when you have two or three people?
The papal system seems to function better than ours. Read up. I don't know, Danny. I'm going to ask a question to Danny. Are those really your questions, or do you just put these out on a group and other people? Because it sounds like it's like different people talking through you. If you are giving the questions out, that's fine. If not, I mean, it's kind of irritating to...
The papal system does not function better.
Yeah, it's just insulting. I don't understand the logic.
So first off, the papal system was developed by Hildebrand. Secondly, it almost involved a 40-year dispute between 40 years between different people claiming to be popes. There was a brief period, about 50 years, and then an anti-pope Victor came about. And then another brief period of about, 150 years. And then you have the whole Babylonian Great Western Schism, where they had two different guys, then eventually three different guys claiming to be pope. Then that kind of settles down into the 1440s, when you have, again, two people claiming to be pope. And then eventually that kind of goes back to one pope. And then you have the Protestant Reformation, which lost half the population to the Roman Catholic Church.
Sounds like a real great working system.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it was just they did. But look at Orthodoxy during that period. I mean, yeah, there were bad things happened and all the rest, but we didn't lose not 50% of our population. In Romania, for example, or Bulgaria to Islam, nor did we have any problems with the Reformation. Though we didn't have some infallible or supreme pontiff directing everybody. And then what happens? The Enlightenment comes into Europe. Papism couldn't stop that. I mean, it didn't stop the Reformation. It was a disaster as far as I can see. It was one unmitigated disaster. And then finally, in the Counter-Reformation period, they kind of circle the wagons and try to, hold on to things. Roman Catholicism claims it replenished its numbers, but it replenished its numbers in the 16th and 17th century. You know how? Because they conquered Latin and what we call Latin America, and they forcibly converted the population. So, and then you have the French kings basically threatening to, almost set up their own independent Gallican church throughout the 17th and the early 18th century. Then the French Revolution, France is essentially lost to Roman Catholicism for all intents and purposes. And then you have the modernist movement in the 19th and then the early 20th century. So, I mean, I don't really see, I don't see the advantage of this papal system. And then eventually you get a crazy guy like a Pope Francis, even more crazier than others, and he doesn't really believe in anything, and you can't do anything about it. So, I mean, that there are people in world Orthodoxy who want to try to have this proto-papal system.
Well, Danny, hold on. I got to interrupt this because this is getting stupid. First off, your retracted message said read up. Your implication is that we don't know what we're talking about and that the position that you're holding is superior to the ones we're holding. I don't like being manipulated and I don't like being gamed. Keep this up and you will be blocked.
All right. Okay, so at this point, okay.
I'm a little tired. I'm a little tired of this being entertainment. It's not supposed to be. In the sense that we're supposed to be helping people defend the faith. No, you misunderstood, of course. We're supposed to learn how to defend the faith. We're supposed to learn how to use the tools and the fathers to defend the faith. And if we're not doing that, we're wasting our time here. That's the honest truth.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I have to say on that. I don't know if you want to stick around the hangout and see what happens if I click the other hangout.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do it.
So at this point, Father Joseph is going to the other hangout to see if this other program, run by presumably a Roman Catholic, if that's going to work. We're going to find out. Sorry for the dead air.
Okay.
What happened?
It's a bunch of people like that are just kind of they're all kind of arguing very subjectively about, like what the Bible means and opening your heart and stuff. I mean, I can't possibly imagine that that's real apologetic. I mean, it sounds entertaining. I don't know if I want to jump in there and just be a pest, but I probably could. Either of us could, really. Look, Danny, it's all right. It's it's not. I didn't take it as disrespect. I honestly took it as honestly, it felt like trolling. And again, I understand. I don't understand exactly what your motivation is. If it's to start doing apologetics yourself, I say have at it. But if there's one thing I've learned from 20 years of doing this, it's that people will often take what you say not seriously. And that's cool. I don't, sit here pointing to my title or anything. It's not something that I've ever done. As a matter of fact, I'd say that was one of the reasons that I wasn't ordained earlier, is because of the fact, because, people will give you offers to join, and become a clergyman or so on and so forth, if you're willing to toe the company line. I've never done that. And so the whole point is, I get that, I don't believe my words come from heaven here, but I also don't, there are some things that came off, and it sounded to me like, kind of like, oh, well, these guys aren't serious. No, we take this very seriously, and we sincerely believe the things that we say. We're not just coming up with an argument for the fun of an argument. And that's one of the reasons why I find the Roman Catholic argument about things like the best way for things to be, whether it be the Immaculate Conception or the papal organizational structure of their church, to be noxious and risible, because you have the tradition, and the tradition, is disjointed and confusing as it can sometimes appear to be, is still a better alternative than some guy making it up and thinking his system's better. This is a system that was handed to us by what we believe to be the God-man, Jesus Christ. And we're turning around and saying, well, maybe we could do it a little better. I mean, that's awful. And when you hear that coming out of the mouth of a Roman Catholic or a Protestant apologist, you don't have to slap them, but you should verbally smack them down, because that is offensive to the Church of Christ. It's offensive to the tradition of the Christ. Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't say, I'm a way that maybe you can improve on.
Yes. I think I can hear my voice on the other side.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
No, can you turn your volume? Can you turn your speakers down?
Let me see. Do I have this on, or hold on? Give me a second. Yeah, I don't know what to even.
Okay, no, that's good.
But well, no, don't worry about it, Danny. Just really, honestly, it's not a matter of tone. It's just it's okay to have questions, but
okay. All right. So the chat controversy. Okay. What other topics can we discuss, Father, that relate to?
None. I'm tempted to say, look. I see if that Protestant chat is open for another 25 minutes or so.
Okay.
I mean, I'm gonna put a link to it because I'm gonna join it, and I figure if I've been sneaking around on it anyway. Hold on, give me a second.
You're gonna put a link in the chat.
Yeah, this CARM chat that I'm gonna go into.
CARM, Christian Apologetics Research Ministry. That's a Protestant.
Yeah, and they're answering everyone or something, and so we're gonna do this. This should be fun. We're gonna just jump on. Okay, this is the link to it. So let's see if it works. Hold on, I'm gonna try it. We can actually, Danny, don't worry about it. We hope to see you again, and we are always thankful that you're there. But we're gonna try something different, and I say we all just cross over and just follow in on their hangout, because it could be fun. And let's see how long it takes before your hosts here, yours truly, are thrown out.
Okay, so are you posting the link somewhere?
Yeah, I posted it live.
In the chat? Hold on.
Yeah.
I don't see it in the YouTube chat anywhere.
In the YouTube, I just posted it there. Hold on. Did you go to live chat?
The last.
Here, I'll send it to you personally too. But the point is, I did.
For example, I don't see link. See, the last thing I see. Okay, you're sending it to me through Facebook. Okay.
Yeah, I'm also sending it to you. I did put it up there, so this should be fun.
All right, I might get on it. I might not. I think I actually have to go to church in a little bit.
Okay.
So.
Well, I say we jump on. Let's see what they can do. We have I figure if we end early, we have 10 minutes to just mess with theirs.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. We'll see everybody next week.
Yeah, that's right. It's the end of the week, so we'll see you on Monday. Thank you very much for listening, and let's jump on and see what happens.
All right. Benedicite.
Benedicite.